Picture this. You're walking through the gaslit streets of Poitiers, France in the summer of 1876, and you witness something that makes your blood freeze in your veins. The most beautiful woman you have ever seen glides to you. Her name is Blanche Monnier, 25 years old, with cascading dark hair and porcelain skin that seems to glow in the lamplight. Men literally stop breathing when she passes. Women grip their husbands' arms tighter. She is perfection incarnate, the jewel of high society, destined for a brilliant marriage, but in exactly 6 months, this woman will be dragged screaming up an arrow staircase and locked in a 12 by 12-foot attic room where she will remain chained into total darkness for 25 years. 25 years without sunlight, without human touch, without mercy. And when police finally break down that door in 1901, they will find a 55 pounds covered in open sores laying naked in a pool of her own excrement and rotting food scraps, her hair almost completely fallen out, her nails grown into twisted claws, her mind so shattered she can only make animals so. An officer will vomit immediately, another will break down, sobbing, a third will have nightmares for the rest of his life, because what they found in that room barely qualified as human anymore. And here's what makes this story so viscerally horrifying, so absolutely soul-destroying that it will crawl under your skin and live there. The person who did this, who watched Blanche's lowly road live for 9,000 days, who listened to her scream, stern to whimper, stern to silence, who walked past that locked door every single morning for a quarter century, is not so psychopathic stranger, it's her own mother. The woman who gave birth to her, who nursed her as a baby, who tucked her into Bassett child, Louise Monnier, respectable widow pillar of society, who decided that her daughter's disobedience deserved a punishment worse than death. Before diving into this forgotten story of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. What you're about to hear isn't just another tragic tale from history. It's the story of how maternal love can't whisk into obsession, how social status can become more important than your own child's life, how a human being can be transformed into a prisoner in her own home, and how an entire society can walk past House of Horrors every single day without ever suspecting the truth. The name Blanche Monnier might not be familiar to you, but her story will change the way you think about family, about power, about the masks people wear in public while committing unspeakable acts in private soul. Let's go back to that summer evening in 1876 and understand exactly what happened to this beautiful young woman and why her nightmare represents one of the most chilling examples of parental control. In all of documented history, you need to understand the world Blanche lived in to comprehend how this horror was possible. The Monnier family resided at 21 Rue de la Visitation in Poitiers, elegant three-story townhouse with marble floors, Persian rugs and crystal chandeliers that spoke of old money and older values, the kind of house where servants moved silently through shadowed hallways and every piece of furniture had been in the family for generations. Blanche's mother, Louise Monnier, was a widow who had spent decades meticulously cultivating the family's reputation in local high society. She tended every important social function, donated generously to all the right charities, ensured that the Monnier name appeared in the society pages with mechanical regularity, wore only the finest imported fabrics, and maintained friendships with everyone who met. Terred in Poitiers, but beneath her respectable exterior, beneath the charitable donations and the elegant dinner parties, Louise harbored an obsession with social status that bordered on pathological, maybe even crossed that border years ago. She had mapped out her daughter's entire life with the precision of a military general planning a campaign. The right schools, the right friends, the right social circles, the right suitors from the right families with the right connections. Blanche wasn't a person to Louise. She was a chess piece in an endless game of Socia. L'advance meant a beautiful, valuable piece that would secure the family's position for another generation. And then the unthinkable happened. Blanche did something that in her mother's eyes was absolutely unforgivable, something that threatened to destroy everything. Louise had spent her entire life building. She fell in love, but not with one of the eligible aristocratic bachelors. Louise had carefully vetted and approved, not with the wealthy merchant's son, or with a young lawyer from the distinguished family, or any of the other suitable matches that would enhance the Monnier family status. No, Blanche fell deeply, passionately, hopelessly in love with an older attorney from a middle-class background. His name has been lost to history, erased from records, perhaps deliberately by a family ashamed of the scandal. But what we know about him Missed this, he was in his late 40s, perhaps even early 50s, already married once before and widowed. He possessed neither the wealth nor the aristocratic bloodline, nor the social connections that Louise demanded for her daughter's husband. He was by all accounts a decent, kind, intelligent man who made Blanche laugh and treated her like an equal, who discussed philosophy and literature. With her race of her opinions actually mattered, but Louise Monnier might as well have been a plague carrier when Blanche first mentioned him at dinner one evening in early 1876. Describing this fascinating attorney she had met at a friend's salon, speaking of him with the breathless enthusiasm that only new love can produce. Louise's reaction was immediate and absolute. She forbade their relationship with a single cutting sentence, declared the man utterly unsuitable, beneath their station unworthy of consideration, and assumed that would be the end of the matter. Because after all, what obedient daughter would dare defy her mother on such a crucial life-altering decision? But Blanche Monnier would defy her for the first time in her 25 years of perfect obedience. Blanche refused to submit. She continued seeing the attorney in secret, arranging careful meetings at the homes of sympathetic friends, at quiet cafes on the edge of town, anywhere her mother's extensive network of gossips and informants wouldn't spot them together. She wrote him passionate letters full of poetry and philosophy, discussing Voltaire and Rousseau, and the new idea sweeping through France is sharing her dreams of a life beyond the suffocating constraints of Poitiers high society. She imagined a future where she could be more than just a decorative wife playing an assigned role in someone else's social theater, where her intelligence and education could matter, where she could choose her own path. But what Blanche didn't understand, what she couldn't possibly comprehend, because she had never encountered true evil disguised as maternal concern, was that her mother's obsession with control went far deeper than ordinary parental worry. Louise had spent their entire adult life constructing an identity, based entirely on social status and public perception. Every decision she made, every word she spoke, every relationship she maintained existed solely to enhance and protect the Monnier family's position in society. The very idea that her daughter would choose personal happiness over social advancement, that Blanche would prioritize love over status motion, over calculation, her own desires, over the family's reputation, represented more than just disappointment or embarrassment to Louise. It represented a fundamental existential threat to everything she had built to the very foundation of her entire life's work. And Louise Monnier was the kind of woman who eliminated threats by any means necessary, no matter how extreme, no matter how cruel, no matter what it cost. It happens on an ordinary Tuesday morning in October 1876, a morning that starts like any other morning in Blanche's life, completely unremarkable, completely normal. She wakes in her canopied bed, surrounded by silk pillows and embroidered blankets, completely unaware that this is the last morning she will ever wake in comfort, the last time she will feel clean sheets against their skin, the last time she will see sunlight streaming through windows for 25 years. She dresses in her usual elaborate fashion, a silk day dress in pale blue with intricate lacy trim, her corset laced by a maid, her hair arranged in the complex style fashionable among wealthy women of the period. She's already planning her afternoon, ready composing the excuses she'll give her mother about visiting a friend, when in reality she's meeting her attorney lover at a small cafe on the far side of town. But when she descends the curved marble staircase for breakfast, something immediately feels wrong. The air in the house feels different. You're charged with attention. She can't identify her mother is waiting in the foyer. Note in the breakfast room where she usually takes her morning coffee, but standing perfectly still in the entrance hall, like a spider in the center of its web. Louise's expression is something Blanche has never seen before, something cold and hard and absolutely final that makes her blood ruinous cold in her veins. Her mother speaks in a voice completely devoid of all emotion, flat, dead, mechanical, like a judge pronouncing sentence. You have a choice. And this relationship immediately, this very moment, marry the man I have chosen for you from an appropriate family, and resume your proper place in this household or face consequences. You cannot even begin to imagine consequences that will last for the rest of your life. Blanche's response in that moment seals her fate forever. She looks her mother directly in the eyes and says, with all the conviction of a 25-year-old woman who has never known real hardship, who ever experienced true suffering, who still believes that love conquers all, I refuse, I love him, and I will marry him whether you approve or not. And in that single moment of defiance, everything changes. What happens next occurs so quickly that Blanche barely has time to process it. Her brother Marcel appears from a doorway. She didn't even know he was behind. Grabbing her arms with shocking, brutal strength, two servants Louise has secretly hired specifically for this exact purpose, men Blanche has never seen before, materialize from the shadows and help drag her toward the staircase as she screams, kicks, and begs for an explanation, demands to know what's happening. pleads for anyone to help her, but the house on Rue de la Visitation has thick walls built in an era when privacy mattered to wealthy families, and her screams accost Leslie through empty hallways. They drag her up past the second floor where her bedroom is located, past the third floor where the guest room sits unused, up a narrow, cramped servant's staircase that Blanche has barely noticed in all her years living in this house, a staircase that she's never had reason to climb because of servants. Quarters are beneath the notice of wealthy young ladies. At the top pees a small wooden door she's never seen opened. Never Revent thought about a door that leads to a cramped attic room tucked under the sloping eaves of the house. The room is perhaps 12 feet by 12 feet, barely larger than a prison cell, with a single small window that has already been nailed shut and covered with heavy moth-eaten curtains that block out every trace of natural light. The floor is bare, splintered wood that will give Blanche's splinters every time she walks across it cold. Assassin. Winter hoskels in summer, there is no furniture except a stained, yellowed mattress thrown carelessly in one corner, already reeking of mold and a dented metal chamber pot that Louise informs her daughter in that same dead, emotionless voice will be emptied once a week. Whether it needs it or not, this is where you will stay until you learn obedience. Louise says, her voice perfectly calm and controlled, as if she's explaining a minor household ruler rather than announcing her daughter's imprisonment. Asif, this is a perfectly reasonable punishment for a perfectly reasonable crime. This is where you will remain until you are ready to apologize, to submit, to accept your proper role as my daughter and marry the man. I have chosen the first night is pure hell, though. Blanche doesn't yet know that she has 8,912 more nights of escalating horror ahead of her. She screams until her vocal cords stare, until she tastes blood in her throat, until her voice becomes nothing but a hoarse whisper that noon will ever hear again. She pounds on that wooden door with both fists until her knuckles plow pin and bones, house through the torn skin, until her hands swell to twice their normal size, until she physically cannot make a fist any more blood smears. The door in long streaks that will still be visible 25 years later. She begs and pleads and promises anything, everything. She'll end their relationship. This second she'll marry whoever her mother chooses. She'll be the perfect, obedient daughter for the rest of her life. She means every word. Terror has a way of making you mean everything, but the house on Rue de la Visitation has thick walls built when privacy mattered, and outside her locked door, life continues normally. Servants, prepared dinner guests arrive for an evening card game. Her mother laughs at someone's joke while Blanche screams, herself unconscious 15 feet above their heads. Days become weeks, and Blanche stops screaming, because what's the point when Noon listens, when Noon cares, when her voice just echoes uselessly in the dark? She tries reasoning with her mother during the brief moments since each day when Louise visits to deliver food, usually just stale bread and tepid water. Sometimes, if Blanche is lucky, supplemented with a few vegetables or a small piece of hard cheeses. Surely this punishment has gone fair enough. Blanche pleads, her voice cracking with desperation. Surely you've made your point, Mother. I understand. I was wrong. I'll end their relationship today, this very moment. I'll marry whoever you choose. I'll be everything you want me to be. Just please, please, I'm begging you, let me out of this room. But here's what makes Louise Monier's psychological profile so deeply disturbing, what transforms this from a story about temporary punishment into something far darker, far more horrifying. Louise doesn't want Blanche to submit, doesn't want there to apologize, doesn't want there to learn obedience at some point during those first brutal weeks. Louise makes a decision that will define the rest of her daughter's existences. She decides that Blanche will never leave that room, not when she apologizes, not when she begs, not when she submits, note ever. Because Louise has realized something that fills her with cold calculation rather than horror. Letting Blanche out now would require explanation, would demand answer. So would she explain to Poitier's shy society why her daughter disappeared for weeks or months? What story could possibly account for that absence without damaging the carefully constructed Monnier family reputation, without raising questions, without inviting gossip? The longer Blanche remains hidden, the more impossible release becomes. Louise has strapped herself in a prison of her own making, and the only solution her twisted mind can conceive is to make the imprisonment permanent, to erase Blanche from existence entirely. 1 year passes in that airless attic room, then 2 years, then 5 years. The attorney Blanche loved, man she was willing to sacrifice everything for, searches frantically for her for months, questioning friends, visiting the Monnier house, demanding answers from Louis. So he plays the role of confused, worried mother with Oscar-worthy conviction. My daughter ran away, she tells him with tears streaming down her face, that she's practiced in front of a mirror. She was always strong, so impulsive. I fear she may have come to harm. The attorney never suspects the truth, because how could he? The truth is too monstrous for a civilized rational mind to even conceive what kind of mother would imprison her own daughter What kind of human being could do something unspeakably evil? Eventually, he gives up these urge. Eventually, here am. Ariazen moves to another city, though he never quite forgets the brilliant, beautiful young woman who vanished without explanation, never stops wondering what happened to her, never stops feeling guilty that somehow we failed to save her, and Blanche locked in her attic prison directly above the elegant drawing rooms where her mother entertains guests, begins to change in ways that would horrify anyone who remembered her as the stunning beauty of Poitiers society without sunlight. Her skin becomes deathly pallid and yellowish from liver damage, then cover weeping sores and infections that never properly healing the damn filthy conditions. Without proper nutrition, she loses weight rapidly, her body literally consuming its own muscle, tissue to survive. Her beautiful, thick, dark hair becomes matted with filth and oil, eventually falling out in large clumps from severe malnutrition and chronic stress. Her teeth loosen in her gums. From scurvy, her nails grow long and twisted because she has nothing to cut them with. Her muscles begin to atrophy from lack of movement, from being confined to such a small space, but the physical deterioration is horrifying. A situs represents nothing compared to the psychological damage that isolation inflicts on the human mind. Humans are fundamentally social creatures. We need interaction, stimulation, purpose, connection to survive, deprive use of the basic needs, and the mind begins to break down in predictable, terrifying ways. Blanche starts experiencing vivid hallucinations, seeing faces forming in the shadows, faces of people she knew, people she loved, people who are dead, hearing voices that whisper terrible things to her, voices that sound like her mother, like her dead father, like the attorney she loved. But the voices don't comfort, they mock her. They tell her she deserves this, that she brought this on herself, that she'll die here. Forgotten, she creates elaborated, detailed fantasy worlds to escape the unbearable horror of her reality, entire imaginary universes, where she's rescued, where she's free, where her mother loves her, but then reality crashes back and she's still in that room, still in the dark, still alone, and that psychological whiplash between hope and despair. Is it so? When form of torture worse in some ways than the physical suffering, because at least physical pain, ish one is their mother visits on each day, usually in the early morning before the household servants are fully awake. Louise brings minimal food, stale bread, and brackish water, barely enough calories to sustain life, empties the overflowing chamber pot with an expression of pure revulsion, and leaves without speaking a single word, without making eye contact, without acknowledging that the creature in this room was once her daughter. She has trained herself not to's. Blanche anymore, not really. She looks through her rather than after maintaining the psychological fiction that this thing in the Addis is not their beautiful, accomplished daughter, but their beautiful and accomplished daughter, but some unfortunate burden should be, or some shameful secret that must be hidden forever. But there's the truly disturbing part. Louise doesn't feel guilty. She feels righteously vindicated in her mind. She's not committing an atrocity. She's maintaining proper standards. She's protecting family honor. She's doing what any responsible mother would do when faced with a disobedient and daughter who threatened to ruin everything. Louise has built. This is discipline. This is necessary. This is justified. The room itself becomes a living character in this ongoing horror story without proper inhalation. The air grows thick and poisonous with the smell of human wasting, unwashed body, and rotting food scraps without heat in winter. The attic becomes so cold that Blanche can see her breathe in the air, even wrapped in the single thin blanket. Louise provides shivers so violently through endless frozen nights that she thinks her bones might chatte. Without cooling in summer, the attic transforms into Anovan temperatures climbing above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, while Blanche lies motionless on her filthy mattress, too weak and dehydrated to even wave away the swarms of flies that buzz around her chamber pot. And years pass in that hell, then 15 years, then 20 years. Blanche Monnier, who was once 25 years old and breathtakingly beautiful, becomes 35, then 40, then 45 years old. But these numbers mean nothing anymore. She has lost all sense of time, living in perpetu. All darkness where there's no difference between day and night, now to mark the passing hours, except by the single daily mother. From her mother, no seasons, no sun rising or setting, just endless black punctuated once daily by a door opening, a tray sliding across the floor, and the door closing again. She loses all sense of self. The woman who once discussed Voltaire and Rousseau, who played Chopin on the piano, who spoke French and Italian and English, who attended opera performances and art exhibitions, that woman is dead. What remains is something else, something that has forgotten it was ever human. She stops bathing entirely, because what's the point when there's no clean water and noon to see her and her skin has merged with the filth? Anyway, she stops trying to keep the room clean because the task is impossible and her body has no energy to waste on futile gestures. She lies on her filthy mattress for days, and sometimes weeks at a time, moving only when absolutely necessary to eat the meager's crap her mother provides, or to drag herself to the chamber pot, conserving every ounce of energy in a body that has almost Nanla. Their body has adapted to imprisonment in horrifying ways here. Yesh have become extremely sensitive to even the tiniest amounts of light that seep under the door, causing searing pain. Her sense of smell has completely shut down as Amercy, because if she could smell what surrounds her, she would go mad. Her skin has toughened into something like leather in some places and dissolved into open wounds. In others, her digestive system has adjusted to near starvation, functioning on perhaps 300 calories per day, less than a prisoner of war receives her menstrue. Cycle stopped years ago, her body recognizing that it cannot sustain a pregnancy, cannot even sustain itself. Meanwhile, downstairs in the elegant rooms just a few feet below Blanche's attic prison, Louise Monnier continues her flawless performance as a pillar of Poitiers society. She hosts a charity ball for orphans in October 1895, dancing in silk while her daughter writhes in filth directly above. She donates to a fund for the poor while keeping her own daughter in conditions worse than any beggar. She tends mass every Sunday, prays for the sow. Elsoff, the unfortunate, sits in the front pew, where everyone can see her piety, and every single night she sleeps peacefully in her comfortable bed, knowing that her daughter is suffering unimaginable agony 20 feet above her head, and she feels nothing, not guilt, not regret, not doubt, nothing but self-righteous satisfaction that she has maintained proper standards. She attends charity functions, hosts dinner parties, donates to the poor. She is widely regarded as a model of respectability and Christian virtue. People compliment her on her generosity, her kindness, her devotion to proper values. Not one of them suspects that she keeps her own daughter chained in the attic like an animal. But secrets, no matter how carefully buried, no matter how many years pass, always have a way of emerging, eventually crawling up from the darkness into the light. In nearly 1901, 25 years after Blanche's imprisonment began, a full quarter century of unimaginable suffering, someone who knows the truth finally breaks their silence, finally decides that they can no longer live with the knowledge of what's happening behind the closed doors of 21 Rue de la Visitation. The identity of this person remains unclear. Event today lost to history. Like so many details of this cases, some historians believe it was a servant who had worked in the Monnier household for years, who had seen Louise climbing those stairs every morning with food and water, who had heard the strange sounds coming from the attic late night, who had finally reached a point where conscience overcame fear of unemployment. Others suggest it might have been Louise's own son, Marcel, who had helped drag his sister up those stairs all those years ago, and was now consumed by guilt that ate away at time every single day, unable to sleep, unable to loo. Cath himself in mirrors, unable to continue living with what he had done. Whoever it was, they send an anonymous letter to the Paris Attorney General, a letter that is brief and factual, but contains details so specific, so disturbing that it cannot possibly be ignored. The letter reads, "I have the honor to inform you of an exceptionally serious occurrence. Is speak of a spinster who is locked up in Madame Monnier's house, half-starved and living for the past 25 years in her own filthing on a rotten mattress that has not been changed in all that time, surrounded by excrement and food waste. Implore you to investigate this matter with the utmost urgency on May 23rd, 1901. Police officers arrive at the elegant townhouse at 21 de la Visitation, their faces grime and determined, their hands resting on the battens at their belts. Louise Monnier, now elderly but still maintaining that same flawless, respectable facade, answers the door with a confused smile, insisting there must be some terrible mistakes, some misunderstanding. There is noon imprisoned in her house, as she declares with absolute conviction. She has nothing to hide. The officers are welcome to search if they wish, but they will find nothing except a well-maintained home belonging to our respectable widows. She is so confident, sourly certain in her denials, so convincing in her performance of shocked innocence that the police almost believe her, almost turn around and leave, almost dismiss the anonymous letter as a cruel prank. But the letter was too specific, too detailed, too disturbing to ignore without a thorough investigations. The officers searched the house methodically, floor by floor, find in nothing unusual in the elegant drawing rooms, nothing suspicious in the bedrooms, nothing incriminating in the kitchen or servants' quarters, until they reach the top floor and notice a small wooden door tucked away in a shadowed corner, secured with a heavy iron padlock that looks like it hasn't been opened in years. When they ask Louise about it, their composure finally cracks, just for a moment, a flicker of something like panic crossing her face before she gains control. It's just storage. She says quickly, but her voice wavers, betrays her old furniture, things we don't use anymore, nothing of any interest to the authorities. I assure you, but the officers are suspicious. Now they can see the fear in. Here you smell the lie in her voice. One of them steps forward and breaks the padlock with a heavy tool, and what they find behind that door will haunt every single one of them for the rest of their lives. Will wake them screaming at 3 a.m. for years, will make them question whether God exists, because what kind of God allows this? The smell hits them first like a physical wall. You could bottle it and use it as a weapon, a concentration of 25 years of human degradation, Suffolk, and choking, that several officers immediately stagger backward and vomit on young Offai. Sir throws up so violently her ruptures blood vessels in his eyes. Another drops his knees, dry, heaving, unable to breathe. It's not just bad, it's a smell that bypasses your conscious brain and triggers pure animal panic. The evolutionary response that screams danger, death, decay run the room itself is completely dark, at first lit only by dim hallway light. As their eyes adjust, they see what appears to be a pile of filthy rags and feces in the corner, surrounded by scattered bones and broken pottery, and things they cannot identify and do not want to examine closely. And then the pile moves, and one officer realizes with dawning absolute horror that he's looking at a human being, or what used to be one once. The official police report uses clinical bureaucratic language, but you can feel the horror bleeding through every word. We immediately gave the order to open the window. Casement, this was done with great difficulty for the old curtains. It's literally disintegrated when touched, falling in a shower of ancient dust and dead insects. To open the shutters, we had to remove them entirely from their rusted hinges as soon as light entered the row. When noticed in the back, leaning on what had once been a bed, a woman, her head and body hidden under a blanket so encrusted with dried waste, had hardened into a shell. This woman, identified as Mademoiselle Blanche Monnier, was lying completely naked on a mattress that had rotted into black pulp. All around her was a thick crust several inches deep, made from layers of dried excrement, food waste, and bodily fluids that had accumulated and compressed over decades. The smell intensified when we approached, making several officers retreat to vomit. Blanche Monnier is now 49 years old, but looks like an ancient corpse that had somehow learned to breathe. She weighs exactly 55 pounds, down from 130 here. Entire body is just skin stretched over bones, so thin. You can see every vertebrae, every rib, every joint. Their arms are not thicker than broom handles. Her legs like twisted sticks that clearly cannot support any weight. Her collarbones protrude so sharply they look like they might pierce through her papery skin at any moment. Her hair, on says so beautiful men wrote sonnets about it, is almost day, completely gone. Just a few wisps of gray clinging to a scalp covered in sores and scabs. Her face is unrecognizable, skull-like with sunken cheeks and eyes that bulge from their sockets. Her lips have pulled back from her gums, which are black with rots. Several teeth are missing, the rest loose and discolored. Her skin is not just pale, it's gray. The color of death, covered in open weeping sores and thick scabs, and what appears to be layers of dried waste that have literally become part of her flesh. Her fingernails and toenails have grown for 25 years without bi. Nenji cut, they've curved back on themselves, digging into her own skin, creating infected wounds she cannot escape from because the source of injury is attached to her body. But nothing prepares the officers for what happens when sunlight hits her face for the first time in a quarter century. She screams the sounds of primal, so filled with pure animal terror that it doesn't register as she manages the sound prey makes when a predator's jaws close around its throat. It's the sound your nervous system makes when it experiences pain beyond what consciousness can process. She thrashes violently, trying to burrow deeper into her filthy nest, covering her face with skeletal hands. Sher Yais cannot process light anymore, cannot handle even dim daylight. After 25 years of absolute darkness, it feels like someone is driving hot needles directly into her brain. Tears stream down her face, mixing with the grime, creating pallet tracks through decades of accumulated filth. One officer, at 20-year veteran, who has seen murders and suicides and bodies pulled from the Seine, breaks down crying, right? They're unable to maintain professional composure. Another officer asks, sure in the gentlest voice he can manage, how long have you been here? Can you tell us what happened? But Blanche doesn't respond, doesn't even seem to recognize that sounds are words have meaning. She makes noises, clicking and grunting and whimpering, but nothing that resembles human speech. Her mind has regressed so far that language itself is gone. The medical examination reveals horror upon horror, severe malnutrition so extreme that her organs have begun shutting down, her liver failing, her kidneys barely functioning. Gerhardt struggling to pump blood through a body that has almost no blood left to pump. Rickets so severe her bones have literally deformed, bending under their own minimal weight. Even without external pressures, she has multiple serious infections spreading through her bloodstreams, sepsis that should have killed her years ago. but somehow didn't bid sore so deep they exposed bone in 7 different locations on her back, hips, and shoulders. The exposed bone itself shows signs of infection, which should be medically impossible, but here it is her muscles have atrophied so completely that she cannot sit up, cannot hold her head upright, cannot control her bladder or bowels. She has regressed to an infantile state, requiring total care for every basic function. Here, Yes may never recover. The sudden light exposure has caused permanent retinal damage, and even if it hadn't, 25 years of darkness has rewired her visual cortex. She may be functionally blind forever, but the psychological damage makes the physical damage look minor. She displays no recognition of herself, no awareness of time, no understanding of lingua. Jesha cannot feed herself and seems confused by the very concept of eating, as if she's forgotten what food is supposed to do. Her rocks back and forth, constantly a self-soothing behavior seen in severely traumatized children and caged animals. She makes no eye contact, shows no emotional response to kindness or cruelty, treats humans and objects with the same blank indifference. Dr. Henry Gerard writes in his official report that Blanche has suffered total cognitive collapses. She's not recovering from trauma. She est trauma, given human form, Louise Monnier is arrested immediately that same day, still protesting her innocences, still insisting she did nothing wrong, and charged with unlawful confinement, abuse, and attempted murder. Her trial becomes an immediate international sensation, with newspapers across European America covering every detail of the case in lurid, shocking headlines. The public's reaction is one of universal horror and absolute disgust. How could any mother do this to her own child? People demand to know what kind of inhuman monster was Louise Monnier. What kind of society allows this to happen? For 25 years without anyone noticing or caring. But Louise, even sitting in a jail cell, waiting trial, even facing the possibility of spending the rest of her life in prison, never expresses remorse, never admits wrongdoing, never acknowledges that what she did was evil. She insists with absolute conviction that she did what was necessary to protect her daughter from making a terrible, life-ruining mistake. Blanche wanted to marry beneath her stations. She tells the court in a calm, rational voice, as if explaining something obvious to slow children. I was trying to save her from destroying her life and our family's reputation. What else could I possibly have? The fact that Blanche is now a completely destroyed shell of a human being, unable to feed herself or control her bodily functions. So recognize her round face in a mirror doesn't seem to register with Louise as her fault or her responsibility in her twisted, delusional mind. She is actually the victim here, the martyr forced to make impossibly difficult choices by her daughter's selfish disobedience. The trial never reaches its conclusion, never delivers the justice that the public demands, because Louise M., on near D. Sofa massive heart attack while awaiting the verdict, collapsing in her cell on morning, and taking all her twisted justifications and rationalizations to the grave with her. Her Marcel, the brother who helped drag Blup those stairs, who held her down while his mother locked the door, who knew for 25 years exactly what was happening and did nothing to stop it, receives a 15-month prison sentence, but serves only a few weeks before being quietly released on dubious health grounds, because apparently helping to imprison your sister for a quarter century isn't really that serious a crime if you come from a respectable family. As for Blanche, she is transferred to a psychiatric hospital in Blois, where she will spend the remaining 12 years of her life under constant medical supervision. The doctors shop desperately that with proper care and nutrition and therapy in time, she might recover at least some of what she lost, that the human mind disresilient enough to heal even from this level of trauma. They are tragically disappointed. Blanche never fully regains her ability to speak incoherency. Intenses never progresses beyond simple words and sounds like a toddler just learning languages. He never walks again. Her leg muscles, to the age too atrophied to ever support their weight. Even with years of physical therapy, she lives in a permanent state of childlike regression, requiring constant care and supervision, unable to dress herself or feed herself or perform the most basic tasks of daily living. When doctors show her photographs of herself from before her imprisonment, beautiful portraits of the stunning young woman she used to be, she shows abs. Absolutely no recognition, no emotional response, no connection whatsoever to that person. It's as if they're showing her pictures of a complete stranger, because in every real sense, that beautiful, accomplished woman died in 1876. And what survived is something else entirely, something broken beyond all possibility of repair. She dies in 1930 at the age of 64, having spent more than half her entire life either imprisoned in that attic or recovering in that hospital from the imprisonment. Her official death certificate lists the causes chronic cachexia and marasmus, which are just fancy medical terms for wasting away from long terms of her malnutrition. But the real cause of death was much simpler, much more direct. Their mother killed her slowly, methodically, systematically over the course of 25 years. The truly terrifying thing about Blanche Monnier's story, the detail that should keep you awake at night, is not just what happened to her, but how it happened in plain sight for a quarter century. Louise Monnier was not some criminal mastermind operating in shadows, not some Zola Ted hermit living far from civilizations. She was a respected pillar of society, living in the very center of a major city, interacting daily with neighbors and friends and fellow churchgoers, hosting dinner parties and charity events for 25 years. She kept their daughter imprisoned just a few feet above the heads of all those dinner party guests, those charity workers, those family visitors, and not one single person suspected, not one person questioned, not one person investigated, because Louise looked like exactly what she claimed to be, a respectable wife. Dao from a good family and society has this dangerous tendency to assume that respectable-looking people from good families couldn't possibly be monsters. Blanche's tragedy reminds us of something we desperately don't want to believe but must accept as truth. The most horrifying evil doesn't always come from strangers lurking in dark alleys or obvious criminals with violent stories. Sometimes it comes from the people who claim to love us most, from family members who has the language of protection and care and doing what's best for you to justify unspeakable cruelty. Sometimes the most dangerous prison is the one built by someone who has convinced themselves they're doing it for your own good, who genuinely believes their actions are justified by some higher purpose, whether that's family honor or social status or religious doctrine. And sometimes the most terrifying truth is that real monsters don't need fangs or claws or supernatural powers. Sometimes all a monster needs is respectability, determination, a position of authority, and a locked door that noon thinks stupid. Blanche Monnier spent 25 years locked in an attic room measuring 12 feet by 12 feet, just 144 square feet of hell, while her mother entertained guests in their rooms below, while neighbors walked past the house every single day, while the city of Poitiers went about its normal business completely unaware that one of their most beautiful daughters was dying slowly just a few feet above their heads. And when we tell ourselves that something like this could never happen today, that we're too civilized, too aware, we're too connected to allow such horror, we're lying to ourselves, because the same dynamics that allowed Blanche's imprisonment still exist. The same tendency to trust respectable appearances, the same reluctance to interfere in family matters, the same willingness to ignore signs that something might be wrong. If acknowledging them would be uncomfortable or socially awkward, if this story affected you, if it made you think about the hidden horrors that can exist behind closed doors, even in the most respectable households, even in the best neighborhoods, even in families that seem perfect from the outside, consider leaving a comment below, sharing your thoughts. And if you want to explore more forgotten stories from history, stories that challenge our assumptions about the past and force us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature, make sure to like this video and subscribe, because history is full of stories like Blanche Monnier's stories that were meant to stay hidden, stories that powerful people tried to bury, stories that deserve to be remembered and told.